I first set foot in Teyvat on August 23rd, 2024. About a year has passed since then. To be honest, I haven't played it every single day. I took my time going through a few periods of burnout along the way. I do love this game, but I've only spent money on it once. There were even times I didn't log in for a while. Even so, if I were to write a memoir of my life, my time with Genshin would take up a significant part of it, because Genshin Impact has had a profound effect on my life. Now, at this 1-year milestone, I want to look back on my experience with this game and reflect on what I've lost and what I've found. I had heard of Genshin Impact before, but I'd dismissed it without even trying. I thought it was just a Chinese knockoff of Skyrim and Breath of the Wild, a game that took the open world genre I love and slapped on the gacha system I despise. In my mind, it was the worst kind of cash grab imaginable. That all changed around July 2024. My girlfriend decided to attend a Genshin Impact cosplay event, and I went with her as a photographer. At that time, I knew nothing about Genshin. All I knew was that the character she was cosplaying was named Liyue, that the ghillie suit I was given was for a tough enemy called an Abyss Mage, and that I would die if I fell into water. From here on out, I refer to her as Liyue. At the event, I had the chance to interact with several other cosplayers. Among them was someone dressed as a character named Alhei-san. He mentioned he was from the same nation as Liyue. The name caught my attention. The Al prefix sounded distinctively Middle Eastern, an interesting choice for a name. A quick search led me to the Genshin Impact wiki. I learned that their home nation, Sumeru, is inspired by South Asian and Middle Eastern cultures, incorporating various cultural and mythological elements. Each character has a specialty dish that resembles cuisine from those regions, and each dish has 3 different grades, with its own appetizing flavor text. What was with this inefficient, seemingly pointless attention to detail? What was I thinking? It was only then that I started to think that maybe Genshin was a game worth playing. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't just a cash grab. Perhaps it was a work of art, crafted with respect for diverse world cultures and a genuine love for open world games. So, I installed Genshin Impact. On the night of August 23rd, I launched Genshin Impact for the first time. Right away, before I even created an account, I knew this game was no joke. What a beautiful music! As the game data slowly loaded over my less than high-speed internet, I found myself captivated by Dream Area. This piece would become one of the most memorable among the many incredible soundtracks I would later discover. So, why is this music so good? There's some kind of insane music theory at play. Let me try to explain it simply. In the world of JRPGs, the most famous theme is arguably the overture from Dragon Quest. The melody of the Genshin's main theme shares its first 4 notes with the overture. Many Japanese players, consciously or not, would expect the next note to be an F, but in Genshin's main theme, a modal interchange occurs on the 5th note, subverting expectations with an F sharp. What does this signify? To me, it felt like an expression of deep love for JRPG soundtracks, while at the same time wanting to create something new from that foundation, or maybe just I'm overthinking it. After a long road, the game finally began. I chose Lumin as my avatar and stepped into the world of Teyvat. The beginning of the game was quite interesting, too. When I was in elementary school, I played an MMORPG called Master of Epic. I absolutely loved that game, and it also started on a coast. As I learned the basic controls on the sandy beach, I couldn't help but be reminded of MOE. By the way, the running animation of the shortest race in MOE, the Elmoni, is remarkably similar to that of the shortest female characters in Genshin. A coincidence? I think not. At this point, my main goal was to meet an abyss mage. I climbed a hill and saw the city of Mondstat in the distance. Apparently, the city had a dragon problem. A clear Skyrim ripoff, I thought. Story-wise, the Mondstat chapter was just okay. It's a tutorial arc for the player, and it felt like the developers themselves were still figuring out the vibe of the game. It seemed like they were trying to find Genshin's unique identity while imitating games like Skyrim and Breath of the Wild. I wish I could give more detailed thought, but this was a year ago and I played for nearly 20 hours straight through the night, so my memory is a bit hazy. Still, there are a few unforgettable moments. One was when I went to Starsnatch Cliff to speak with Duvalin during a quest. After the cutscene, I realized this spot was right above the starting beach. I looked down at the shore below, then over at the distant Mondstat city, and was filled with an emotion I couldn't quite put into words. I stood on the cliff's edge and took a screenshot. I opened the map and saw that I still had 6/7 of the entire world locked. Yet, the fact that this world is finite, and that I would one day visit every statue of 7 and unlock the whole map, was somehow invigorating. Looking back, I think it was something close to what Kant called the sublime. I was also drawn to the philosophy of the legion's god, who appeared to be a young girl. Near the end of the questline, when La Signora landed a heavy blow on her, I swore I'd get my revenge someday. Shortly after, I learned that this god was not a girl. It was my first time falling for a trap. The words of the Anemo Archon, Barbatos, at the end of the story have become my motto for the past year. The destination is not everything, so before you reach the end, keep your eyes open. Use the chance to take in the world around you. When I reached Adventure Rank 16, Co-op Play unlocked. With Niru as my guide, I headed for Liyue. Liyue had a completely different atmosphere from Mondstat. I was captivated by the beautiful scenery, which looked like it was straight out of a traditional Chinese landscape painting. After climbing it with barely more than the starting amount of stamina, the view from the top of Senyon Peak was breathtaking. I turned down her offer to guide me to Liyue Harbor and decided to explore on my own. After all, this is an open-world game, and the exploration is the heart of it. Back in college, I took a liberal art course where I learned about ancient Chinese mythology, culture, and their own worldview. In their cosmology, the world is a flat plane, and the energy flows down from the celestial world, becoming the yellow river that nourishes the land. Therefore, if you travel all the way up to the yellow river, you can eventually reach the realm of the stars. It felt to me like the worldview of Liyue and perhaps Genshin as a whole was heavily influenced by this idea. And then, in Liyue, I was blown away by the combat. Apparently, this game has 3 different battle themes for each region. In a sharp turn from Mondstat modern sound, Liyue's BGM had a magnificent atmosphere, woven with traditional Chinese instruments. I was certain there had to be much more incredible music waiting for me in this world. After clearing Act 3 Song of the Dragon and Freedom, I unlocked access to Simulanka. This area would become inaccessible once the event ended, and I only had 3 days left. I decided to rush through and explore it. Though I was confused by the characters I'd never met, talking to me like old friends, I spent another 20 hours reaching the deepest part of Simulanka. Then I spent another 10 hours collecting everything. This is where I hit the wall. I just couldn't complete the challenge like defeat all enemies within the time limit. I thought maybe my party's level was too low. So I went back to Mondstat, raised my adventure rank, and leveled up all my characters to their maximum. As a result, the enemies just got stronger and I still failed. The problem was a skill issue. I had to actually learn about elemental reactions. I realized I couldn't just spam normal attacks. I needed to combine multiple elements to unleash powerful attacks. Luckily, the anniversary event was giving away a free 5-star character at the time. I chose Mona. She is voiced by the same actor as Yuko Yoshida from The Demon Girl Next Door, and Mona is a Hydro character, meaning I could pair her with Lisa to trigger an electrocharge reaction. After leveling up Mona and swapping her in for Amber, I finally cleared the challenge with just a few seconds to spare. And here again, I was mesmerized by the music. I was completely captivated by the BGM that played during combat in Simulanka. I looked it up and found that the track was called Lamentation et Triomphe, a battle theme from the 5th nation, Fontaine. The song gave me vibes of Leave the Precipice from the game Trusty Bell. That's another one of my favorites, though I've never actually played it. The reason I know this song is because of this Automat, a type of music mashup video on Nico Nico Douga. Music you hear while overcoming a great obstacle becomes unforgettable. And so, my goal for my journey in Genshin was set to one day hear Lamentation et Triomphe during battle in Fontaine. After Simulanka, I returned to Liyue to continue the main quest. Again, I played through it in one long session, and with all the proper nouns being complex Chinese characters Japanese rarely use, I can't recall details at all. However, I'll never forget the way the schemes of multiple factions converged into a final battle against Uxiao, the defense style format of that fight, and how incredible the music was. I fought the Fatui in a state of pure excitement, without really understanding what was going on. Let's talk about the music. The BGM for this defense battle is called Dance with the Great Vortex. The use of motifs in this track is also fascinating. It's in an unusual shifting time signature, yet the underlying rhythm is shared with the music that plays in Liyue Harbor. It's a perfect fit for a battle to defend Liyue. And at the end of the loop, the main theme of Genshin Impact, which I hadn't heard for a long time since leaving Mondstat, makes a brief appearance, or at least I'm pretty sure it does. It felt like I was fighting the final boss of the entire game. Though it seemed optional, I also played the Interlude chapter, The Crane Returns on the Wind. It was magnificent. But it wasn't just the story that moved me. What impressed me most was that the cutscene for the Divine Damsel of Devastation is performed in Chinese, regardless of the player's chosen voiceover language. I couldn't help but feel the Chinese developers' love and pride for their own culture. They weren't just borrowing from real-world cultures. They were trying to share the value of their own culture with the world. I could truly feel their soul in it. It felt like there was something they, as individuals, not just as cogs in a corporate machine, desperately wanted to convey to the player. This was no cash grab. It deserved to be called a work of art. For the first time in this game, I cried. After saving Liyue and rebuilding the Jade Chamber, I set off for Inazuma. This region, I learned, was inspired by Japanese culture. My first impression of Inazuma was that it was incredibly dark. Unlike Mondstat and Liyue, a gloomy, oppressive atmosphere hung over the entire nation. It was so bleak that even exploring felt arduous. To be honest, I found Inazuma's Archon quest to be the weakest of them all. The story's pacing was a mess, too slow in the first half and far too rushed in the second. It felt like it was bogged down by an overabundance of lore, failing to show, not tell. That's not to say it was all bad. The combat difficulty increased, and in particular, the Delusion Factory presented another major challenge for me. I learned how powerful dendro-directed reactions were, so I made a trip to Sumeru to get the dendro element for my traveler and unlocked Kore from the Spiral Abyss. It was only after I discovered a new strategy, using them and Mona to create Bloom Quartz, then having Lisa triggered Hyper Bloom, that I was finally able to break through. The battle against La Signora was also extremely difficult. I won by the skin of my teeth. While I felt a slight twinge of pity for her, getting my revenge was undeniably satisfying. One of my most memorable experiences in Inazuma was the world quest, Sacred Sakura Cleansing Ritual. The boss fight in this quest was quite complex. You have to constantly avoid enemy attacks while periodically refreshing a shield that grants temporary immunity to the damaging Bell Thunder, all while solving puzzles using the knowledge gained throughout the quest to down the boss and deal damage. I managed to beat it, panicking as I watched my food supplies dwindle. As I said before, music you hear while overcoming a great obstacle becomes unforgettable. The soundtrack for this fight is a regular battle theme called Overlord of the Thunderstorm. Combat usually ends too quickly to hear the whole thing, but this boss fight allowed me to listen to it for an extended period, and I was captivated by its structural beauty. It begins with a Japanese-style variation of Photon of Fluctuation on the xylophone, then incorporates the motif from Liyue's Rapid as Wildfires, only for the Inazuma main theme to make an appearance in the next loop. My favorite part is a Picardy third in the following section. It sounds like a brief glimpse of the sun through a storm. Combined with the well-written story, I nearly cried during the fight. And speaking of which, the main theme for Inazuma is a fantastic piece in its own right. Yu Pen-chen, the composer for the game up to Sumeru, has said he was inspired to pursue music after watching Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. The influence of its composer, Joe Hisaishi, is clearly reflected in the Inazuma theme. I can only imagine how much fun he must have had creating it. Joe Hisaishi's music holds a special place in my heart too. It was through his music that I was drawn into the world of music. When I was in middle school, my music class had to sing a choral piece called Tabidachi no Toki, Asian Dream Song. At that time, I noticed it sounds a bit like something from the Toho project, which got me curious. After a few twists and turns, 3 years later, I finally figured out that the similarity came from a 4-5-6 chord progression, something that could be explained by the grammar of music theory. That discovery is why I still compose music as a hobby today. However, the Inazuma main theme goes far beyond such a basic understanding, possessing an extremely complex jazz-like harmony, and that is a hallmark of Joe Hisaishi's music. Any further explanation is clearly beyond my abilities, so I'll leave it to this video. It's a severely underrated analysis, so I highly recommend you watch it. Around the time I finished Inazuma, the Raiden Shogun's banner was running. Being an Archon, she seemed to be extremely powerful. I got her and added her to my party, hoping to make her reflect on the tyrannical rule she had imposed on Inazuma. With that, my one-shot burst team of Bennett, Mona, Raiden, and Noel was complete. I learned that to maximize the Raiden Shogun's potential, a weapon called the Catch was essential, but the sheer number of fish required was immense. Waiting for them to respawn in my own world would have taken days. So for the first time, I decided to enter another traveler's world. I typed in my broken English, "Can I fish in your world?" Luckily, several kind players welcomed me in. I'd fish, and then as a thank you, we'd do their daily commissions together or challenge an artifact domain. It was a completely different side of Genshin, one that you don't see when just following the main story. The joy of interacting with complete strangers, people I never would have met and likely will never meet again, and tackling the world's challenges together. I couldn't help but feel a wave of nostalgia for the golden age of MMORPGs. What I'm trying to say is, I felt a connection. I realized the developers of Genshin must have a gaming history similar to my own. They must have grown up with MMORPGs, played Skyrim, and known the pure joy of adventuring in a vast world. I bet some of them even played Skyrim with tons of mods, or maybe even made mods themselves. They must have felt the same desire I did back when I was obsessed with Skyrim. The desire to run around a huge world, not with realistic faces and plain clothes, but with cute, vibrant, anime-style characters. And they took that desire and turned it into a full-fledged game. And they nailed it. I only ever played co-op that one time, just to get the catch, but it remains an unforgettable memory. The next nation was Sumeru, the very reason I started playing Genshin in the first place. Sumeru's Archon quest was phenomenal. It felt like Genshin had finally moved beyond simply imitating Skyrim and Breath of the Wild and had established its own unique identity. The Sub-Zero's festival arc, in particular, was brilliant. The escape from a time loop is a well-worn trope, especially in Japanese media from the late 2000s to the early 2010s. Starting with Endless 8 from Haruhi Suzumiya, it's been done to death in countless series like Higurashi, Madoka Magica, and Steins Gate. But Sumeru's take on it was masterful, integrating the theme of samsara to create an experience unique to this region. One aspect of this trope that's often overlooked is that the timeline being repeated is supposed to be an enjoyable one. In Endless 8, the fact that the summer vacation, a time students wish would last forever, is what endlessly repeats, gives the whole arc an airy, cautionary feel. Sumeru's Loop, which traps you in the Sub-Zero's festival, an event that is meant to be joyful, perfectly captures this essential charm of the trope. From an immersion standpoint, the Traveler's deduction segments introduced in Sumeru were an interesting game design choice. Sumeru's arc quest is incredibly long, and following the story can sometimes feel like a chore. While the success or failure or your deductions doesn't change the outcome, they force the player to think about what's actually happening, which I think was highly effective in creating a sense of agency, even if it was illusionary. The direction and voice acting were also meticulous. Like many other players, I got chills when my screen filled with the number 4 as the only dialogue option. Leaving Paimon behind to investigate felt so awful that honestly, I don't think I've ever been more immersed in a game. As soon as the Sub-Zero's festival arc ended, I bought the Waking Moon. I felt I shouldn't keep playing this game for free. I rarely spend money on free-to-play games. The only other time in my life I've done it was for Master of Epic, which I mentioned earlier. Now let's talk about the music. Sumeru's soundtrack is where they really started experimenting. For instance, the track Gilded Runner uses a time signature based on the Fibonacci sequence. In Polminia Omnia, they blend a full orchestra with electronic instrument and a shakuhachi. They even pushed the boundaries with vocals, using lyrics in both Latin and Japanese, and having the composer himself, Yu Pen Chen, perform the solos. At the same time, the music shows a profound respect for traditional classic music. I especially want to mention the strong influence of Rimsky-Korsakov's Scheherazade on the Sumeru's main theme. Ever since I first heard it during the industrial era of Civilization 4, Scheherazade has remained my favorite classical piece. The overall atmosphere, the instrumentation, and the harmonies are clear match, and the Sub-Zero's festival motif can be described as a take on Scheherazade's iconic violin solo, but with a greater emphasis on the loop aspect of samsara. By the way, Scheherazade is protagonist and storyteller of 1001 Nights. Her sister name is Dunyazad, which, needless to say, is the same name as one of Sumeru's most unforgettable NPCs. There is no doubt in my mind that the Sumeru's theme is a deliberate homage to Scheherazade. Side note, while writing this script, I did some research and discovered that the influence from Scheherazade wasn't just my imagination. It was explicitly pointed out in this official video. I want to talk about Paimon. I was deeply shaken by the interlude chapter, Calibut. Beyond the tragic nature of the story itself, I felt a profound loneliness during this quest when Paimon wasn't there. It made me realize just how much I had taken her presence for granted and just how much I've grown to love her. Why do I like Paimon so much? Thinking about it, I believe it comes down to two things. The first is the classic body dynamic, the appeal of pairing a silent but smart character with a chatty and clumsy one. The second reason is that she is a guide. More specifically, she understands the traveler so well that she acts as a window to the world for her silent companion. Like most people who play this game, I'm not exactly an extrovert, but I don't want to be completely cut off from the outside world either. I wish there was someone like Paimon in my real life. Perhaps for me, Niru was my Paimon. Remember her? The cosplayer who got me to play Genshin in the first place. Around the time I finished the Sumeru chapter, a lot was happening in my real life. To be frank, 2024 was one of the darkest years of my life. I suppose it's time to talk about the what I lost part of this essay's title. What did I lose? Around July, a distant relative showed up at my door unannounced. My father, from whom I had been separated since my parents' divorce in my childhood, had passed away. He had left behind a small amount of debt, and I had to rush between government offices and the courthouses to renounce my inheritance. It was the first time I had lost a close family member. Honestly, his death itself didn't shake me that much. I hadn't seen him in over 15 years. In a way, he was already dead to me. But the fact that he had died alone in the home, that his body hadn't been discovered for so long that they couldn't even determine the exact date of death, that part of my college tuition was paid with the child support my mother had to forcibly collect from him, and that I never had the chance to thank him or even let him know I'd grown up well. Those things cut me deep. If I had never been born, maybe he wouldn't have struggled with debt. Maybe my parents could have had a happy marriage. Then, in October, I went through a breakup with a girl who cosplayed Niru, the one who inspired me to play Genshin in the first place. I still don't know what caused it, but maybe it was because I was so distraught over my father's death. Or maybe it was because I kept refusing her help as a guide in Genshin. It's an open world game after all. Having someone hold my hand through it would have ruined the fun. Still, I should have found a better way to say it. If the latter is true, the situation becomes deeply ironic. She gave me the gift of Genshin, and in a way, Genshin cost me her. The only silver lining was that this all happened after I had finished the Sumeru storyline. Even now, I can't bring myself to look at Niru in the game. It triggers personal memories and brings up complicated feelings. If this had happened any earlier, I probably would have never made it past Sumeru. Wherever you go, whatever life throws at you, in Teyvat, the stars in the sky will always have a place for you. I know it sounds cliché, but in a situation like that, the fact that Teyvat gave me a place to belong was a huge comfort and did wonders for my mental health. After crossing the desert, I arrived at Maritime Harbor. My big goal in Genshin had been to reach Fontaine and hear Lamentation et Triomphe in battle. With that goal accomplished and no one left to catch up to, I lost my motivation to play. I took my first long break and only returned 2 months later after receiving a comeback event email from Paimon. During the break, I had developed a mindset close to what you might call absurdism or optimistic nihilism. I realized that playing Genshin no longer had any inherent meaning, but it was precisely because it was meaningless that I was free to play it however I wanted. At that time, I was running a Hyperbloom party with Nahida, Shinchu, Shinobu, and Noel. But I decided to stop chasing the meta. Instead, I started adventuring with my Hydro Traveler and characters I simply liked. Fontaine's Conquest was magnificent. The direction system from Sumeru evolved into an Ace Attorney-style courtroom debate, which did a fantastic job of harmonizing the story progression with the gameplay, greatly enhancing the sense of immersion. Culturally, you can see influences from industrial-era Britain and revolutionary-era France everywhere. I appreciated that the game didn't just cherry-pick the glamorous aspects, but also depicted the bloodier elements. The questline in Fontaine faithfully mirrors the real history of France, where unrest beginning at the Bastille eventually led to the king's execution by guillotine. This might be an unpopular opinion, but I loved the Fortress of Meropideac. For the entire duration of that quest, I imposed a rule of myself. I would not leave the fortress, no matter how much my raging overflowed. The meta is meaningless, artifacts are meaningless, and therefore, raging is meaningless. I had decided that the best way to enjoy this game was to fully immerse myself in the traveler's shoes and experience the world as one with her. Let's talk about the music. It's incredibly varied, ranging from old-fashioned, almost baroque style to modern, grandiose JRPG-like tracks. I've already talked about Lamentation et Triomphe, so let's touch on something else. I love the melody of Fontaine's main theme. That's the thing. The melodies in Genshin's music are truly wonderful. Even though Yupen Chen had left the music team after Sumeru, his legacy was clearly being carried on. When the familiar melody from the city theme was replayed during the final act of the Conquest, combined with the moving storyline, it really struck a chord with me. Around the time, I was approaching the 1-year mark of practicing the acoustic guitar. To be precise, I had first tried to learn it 10 years ago, but the finger pain and the dreaded F chord made me give up. I only picked it up a year ago. Why then? Because I had bought a guitar for Niru as a gift, hoping to share the joy of music with her, and we were practicing together. Okay, let's stop with the sad stories. My first practice piece has been the Genshin main theme. Now captivated by Fontaine's music, I decided to look for a new challenge. Fortunately, someone had uploaded high-quality sheet music and a performance guide for Le Moment de Folie. I decided to make that my next piece. Freed from temporal, financial, and emotional burden of my relationship with Niru, I decided to travel in the real world. In January, I went to Nagoya, and in February to Kyushu, enjoying conversations with locals at bars and street food stores. Having installed the Traveler OS in my mind, the world around me seems to shine brighter than before. I think burying yourself in work after a breakup is a common defense mechanism, and I was no exception. I managed to achieve some decent results at my job, which led to my first ever overseas business trip that summer. I went to Las Vegas, where I experienced a substance not unlike what the sages of Sumeru might have used, and I skipped a full day of the conference to take a tour of the Grand Canyon. During the tour, as I was reading the pamphlet they handed out at the National Park entrance, I spotted something interesting. One of the viewpoints overlooking the Grand Canyon was named Kachina Point, and isn't there a character in Natlan named Kachina? A quick search confirmed it. Natlan is indeed a nation inspired by Native American, South American, and African cultures. The following is an excerpt from a journal I wrote at the time. This adds another layer of meaning to my Grand Canyon tour. In the game, I had just begun exploring Natlan. The journey from Las Vegas, a city overflowing with water and technology, to the Grand Canyon, a place of aridness and primal power, perfectly parallels the journey from Fontaine to Natlan. In a way, I was reliving the sensations of my in-game avatar during this tour. It's a strange thought, isn't it? To discover the joy of open-world gaming in the real world. The core of what makes open-world game fun lies in the experience of travel in the real world. Games are tools that allow us to simulate that experience. And through this simulation, I was beginning to find the joy of real travel. It's a bit of a twisted, ironic thing to realize. After returning from Las Vegas and taking a second long break to focus on work, I started playing Genshin again. This was in September. Natlan's Archon Quest was a mixed bag, underwhelming in the first half, but brilliant in the second. It felt like a more severe version of the problem I had with Inazuma. A failure to show, not to tell, due to an overload of lore. When you have to introduce not one nation but 6 tribes in a single chapter, all while dropping lore bombs about Teyvat fundamental systems, it's almost inevitable that it becomes an exposition dump. I can recall at least 3 separate instances of free Q&A time with someone who knows what's going on, which is definitely overkill. However, from the war against the Abyss onward, the second half, with its masterful direction, had me on the edge of my seat. It did an incredible job of portraying both the exhilaration of fighting as a representative of your people and the tragedy of the many sacrifices that come with war. Let me tell you how immersed I was. There is a moment in the story when a major character dies. Her body is laid out on a rug, adorned with flowers, with a woman beside her chanting a prayer. Genshin has had its share of deaths before, but this was depicted in a way that was clearly on another level. Seeing it, my first thought was, wow, they really went there. And I instinctively went to take a screenshot. But then, I felt a strong sense of internal resistance. It was a moral feeling, a pang of conscience, telling me that it's wrong to take photos of the deceased at a funeral. What truly confused me was the hesitation itself. This is a game. What's on the screen is just pixels. Even if you raise the level of abstraction, the 3D model itself is identical to how the character looked when she was alive. And yet, my brain had perceived that object as a body that should not be casually photographed. What's the lesson here? When you see a question mark placed on a bed, you should probably prepare yourself for a long and heavy story segment. By the way, I find it interesting that Natlan explores the unique philosophies and lifestyles of a people for whom war has become a part of daily life. As someone who has lived a peaceful life in a peaceful country, it would be ridiculous for me to talk about the realities of war, so instead, I'd like to share this review I found online. Like, all of that was just a part of life, something you just accepted and moved on with. Like someone died, but they died for something meaningful. I had several family members like that. My name comes from that. But I suppose I just needed to share this all out because it was honestly just really nice to see a game put on perspective of war that isn't just some endless parade of violence, but just kind of like for many, just another part of life. Now let's talk about the music in Natlan. It's on another level. I had explored Natlan a bit before starting this story, so I already knew how incredible the music was. The shock I felt during my first battle there, when I deliberately prolonged the fight just to listen to the Anthem of Savannah, is unforgettable. But the crowning achievement is Natlan's main theme. It's a magnificent piece with a Swahili core and tribal instruments, clearly influenced by Chris Fontaine. I mentioned that I know Scheherazade thanks to Simulanka, so of course, Baba Yaga is also deeply ingrained in my memory. Baba Yaga remains, for me, the greatest video game song of all time, and Chris Fontaine is one of the greatest musicians. Let me share a personal story. When I was in middle school, my grade went on an overnight trip. On the final night, we had a campfire and each group had to perform a skit. For some reason, my group went with my idea to do an air performance of Baba Yaga. I'm pretty sure I was the only one who had ever played before, but the power of the song seemed to resonate with everyone regardless of the game. I took responsibility, ripped the track from my Civ4 game files, bound it onto a CD, and sang the lyrics phonetically. Feeling the heat of the fire on my back, contemplating the development of human civilization, and singing a poem in a language I didn't understand. My adventure in Natlan brought back that same primal sense of exhilaration. So, that is a summary of my journey in Genshin Impact so far. In the course of this journey, I have lost many things and I have found many things. It's easy to list what I've lost: sleep, a little bit of money, the relationship with the person who guided me into this world, and of course, my own shallow prejudice against this game. Then, what have I found? That list is much longer than the list of what I've lost. But to explain that, I first need to ask you a question. Have you ever stopped to think about who the traveler really is? A traveler from another world, or a silent avatar who can wield multiple elements without vision. These things are true, but they are only surface-level traits. I believe that he or she represents humanity, or perhaps what humanity ought to be. To explain what I mean, I need to talk about another journey from a completely different story. Have you seen the 27th anime, Cameron Friends? The protagonist of this masterpiece, Kaban, is the anthropomorphication of a human. She is humanity. She journeys to discover who she is, all while solving the problems of the animal gods she meets along the way. I love this anime. Why? It's not just because it lets you turn off your brain and soak in a peaceful, gentle world. It's because the show teaches us about vast potential that human beings possess and the importance of making the most of it. And I feel that Genshin Impact at its core shares this same theme. The traveler has a clear goal to find their lost sibling, and yet they take a remarkable number of detours. Sure, Kavan had to fix a bridge to get to the library, and the traveler had to clear their name before they could speak with Morax. But did they really need to help beavers build their home? Did they have to stop an idol group from breaking up? Did they need to participate in a civil war to overthrow a corrupt feudal system? Was it truly necessary to liberate a lowly deity with a penchant for scatological humor? None of these things were essential to achieving their main objective, and yet they choose to help the people they met along the way. But why? And it's not just them. I want to ask you this same question. While doing your daily commissions in Mondstat, or even after farming the Deepwood Memories set, you've probably saved an adventurer or merchant in distress a few times. The reward is nothing more than a small amount of Mora and EXP. So why did you do that? I think I finally found the answer in the writings of Immanuel Kant. Kant says this: act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of any other, never merely as a means to an end, but always at the same time as an end. In other words, don't just use people, recognize their inherent worth. They were simply following this categorical imperative. For that reason, they did not choose an efficient, rational journey. They had to recognize the personhood of the people they met along the way and offer them help. But they also did not treat themselves merely as a means. So what does it mean to treat oneself as an end? Kant explains, a human being has a duty to himself to cultivate his natural powers of the spirit, mind, and body, as a means to all sorts of possible ends. He owes it to himself, as a rational being, not to live idle and, as it were, lasting away the natural predispositions and capacities that his reason can someday use. I would say they are faithfully following these words: the will to help others and to maximize one's own potential. Isn't that, simply put, the very definition of an adventurer? 2024 was the worst year of my life, but 2025 has been the best so far. It was a year I started challenging myself in new ways, pushing my own limits and rediscovering old passions. And yet, right now as I'm writing this script, my mental state is honestly not the best. Things has been going well at work, so well that I'm now facing a new challenge: public speaking. I have to do a presentation tomorrow. My sleep has gotten shallow. My use of sleeping aids has increased, and every few days I have nightmares about giving a presentation in front of an audience. Maybe I should go visit the hot spring in Inazuma. But in the real world, there is no clinical psychologist like Mizuki. So to overcome my fear, I am making this video. Now you might be wondering, what does any of this have to do with Genshin Impact? For me, all of these new challenges are inextricably linked to the game. Why did I start playing the violin again after 10 years? Because I was so moved by the Enkanomiya battle theme, Combat Beneath the Waves, that I still loved its sound. I didn't even know Enkanomiya existed until I stumbled upon this video, so thank you very much. Why did I start running? Why did I start writing again? The answer is simple. To be honest, I want to be the traveler. I must continue to challenge the unknown to unlock my own potential. And in the course of that journey, I must recognize the personhood in everyone I meet and help them unlock their potential too. That is the spirit of an adventurer, and it is a way for me to become the traveler. So that was my look back on a year spent with Genshin Impact. I lost no small number of things, but through it all, I learned how to walk through my own life as a traveler. It might seem comical thinking I've come to understand the world through a video game, but pragmatically speaking, I believe my life is shifting in a better direction thanks to Genshin, at least for now. To close things out, let me introduce you a small, seemingly trivial feature in Genshin that I love. The dialogue choices in Genshin are infamous for being completely meaningless. If you are lucky, your choice might change the very next line of dialogue, but no matter what you pick, it has absolutely no impact on the story that follows. And yet, the game still gives us these choices. Even if we can't change the overall story, we can let the traveler speak for us in that single moment, expressing what we feel. What does this mean? So, let's play a final thought experiment. If I could travel back in time 1 year, let's say there were no Steins Gate-like restrictions, and I was free to rewrite the past. Would I have avoided playing Genshin? Would I have prevented my father's death, or arranged to see him before he passed? Would I have avoided the breakup with Niru? The answer is no. Of course, choices do affect the subsequent story. There were countless opportunities to take on easier, smoother paths. Even so, the path I have walked is the one and only journey that has led me to the person I'm today, writing this very script. To deny that would be to devalue the journey itself. It is all a part of my journey. Ah, that expression sounds familiar. Let me end this script by sharing one last time the words of my animal archon, Barbatos. Traveler, as you set off on your journey once again, you must remember that the journey itself has meaning. The birds of Teyvat, the songs and the cities, the Talitza, her factory, and the monsters, they are all part of your journey. The destination is not everything. So before you reach the end, keep your eyes open. Use the chance to take in the world around you. So thank you for watching until the end. Whatever your journey may be, I hope it's a wonderful one.